shopgear.com.
The following is a presentation of the Gear Radio Network.
You're listening to the Sabrecast, brought to you by Better Live Than Dead. And now your hosts, Brayton Wilson and Ryan Wolfe.
Hey, with that, we welcome you to another edition of the Sabrecast. In typical fashion, before I started the podcast, I did not look to see what number of Sabrecast this was. So, hey, I'll tell you in a few minutes when I figure it out. But I am Ryan Wolfe at WolfeBLTD, joined today by the first special guest of the Sabrecast era, Chad DeDominicis from Die by the Blade. And it's funny that Chad joined us because not only is Chad the managing editor of Die by the Blade, but he's also my boss. So I can't say too many bad things because he might yell at me. Chad, good morning.
What's going on, man?
Not too much. I know before we got in the air, we're talking about a windstorm. We're trying to get this podcast in before hell literally shows up in Western New York.
Yeah,
it's
crazy.
It sounds kind of bad. Even in Batavia, it sounds kind of bad outside already. And I wasn't expecting it to be so bad so quick, but I guess that's what I get for not paying attention.
The weather will get you here in Buffalo. You know, it was sunny when I went downstairs to start recording this, and now I can see out the window, and it looks like pitch black outside, and I can hear the rumbling in the background.
It's like, oh, cool. I thought it was morning, not 3 a.m., whatever.
Right.
But
yep.
This is episode 8. I just double-checked on my phone. Thankfully, we can do that. Episode 8 of the Sabrecast. We're going to talk the trade deadline today. I know there's not really a whole lot going on with the Sabres and the trade deadline because the players that they have, no one really wants. And the players, that's a twofold problem because first off, not a whole lot of trading going on off the roster, but also when they want to bring people on the roster, kind of hard when you have assets that people don't really care about. But Chad, that's why you're here. You get to make it sound fun and you get to make the Sabres sound exciting. First off, I mean, it's been real rough watching the Sabres lately because it doesn't seem like they have much of an identity. So for you, I know that you've been hitting the self-proclaimed number nerd as you were so well called on Twitter. You've been nailing it, absolutely nailing it on Twitter. So for you, what has been the problem with the Buffalo Sabres really since their 10-game win streak in terms of lacking an identity?
It's a lot of things. It's hard. I guess it's hard where to start. It's I guess one of the main things you can start with is the goaltending. That has dropped off pretty considerably. It's nice to see Hutton over the last few games kind of get it back a little bit to where it was the old form, but I think that's one of the more significant things that's hurt them. Where in November, when they had that, when they had that streak going, the goaltending was going pretty well. It was kind of boosting them up. They were having some secondary scoring. It was kind of one of those things where for about a month you kind of had both things of luck going in your favor. They won a lot of 1-goal games. They got a lot of overtime wins. They got a lot of shootout wins. But since then, that's gone away. The goaltending has dipped. The shooting percentage has gone down. And then the defense itself, has been pretty poor in their own end. A lot of the stuff from last year kind of is creeping back in with their breakouts being pretty bad, which doesn't help them get up the ice and start going offensively. And then when you have trouble scoring when you're in the offensive zone, not being able to generate offense out of your own defensive zone is not necessarily keys, or I guess keys would be the word, to success. So it's been tough. It's a one-line team offensively. Rasmus Dahlin is a great defenseman, and beyond that they have some question marks. So it's like a lot of, I don't want to say perfect storm, but it's kind of a lot that goes into it. And here we are with 20 games left, and they got a surprising win yesterday. We'll say that, but we'll kind of see how these next few games go here with Toronto twice, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh in the mix here. So we'll kind of see how they come out of this. But unfortunately, if it doesn't go well, they could be out of this thing, if not already, but really out of this thing by the beginning of March, which is unfortunate.
And really looking back at it too, it's a bummer, man. I know you and I have chatted on and off throughout the season about how excited things have been and how excited we've been because, obviously no matter what, people are going to read what we write. They're going to want to talk about what we talk about, but it's always more exciting when the Sabres are good. The 10-game win streak was, for me, a revelation. It was nice to feel excited about hockey again. And then as the season has gone on, it's been kind of a roller coaster, I guess, of mediocrity. It's been real tough because we went from a point where you're looking at the big names in the trade market and everyone's like, oh yeah, Buffalo could go get that guy. Buffalo could get that guy with these prospects, with these picks, whatever. The wheeling and dealing of Jason Botterill, everything could be great. And now we're literally a couple days before the trade deadline, or a day. I mean, at this point of time of recording, we're a day before the trade deadline. And it doesn't look like there's a whole lot that could be going on. Maybe some small deals here, small deals there, some to help out Rochester, maybe. But when you look at this roster, Chad, is there really anybody that sticks out to you that could be that screams, oh my God, this guy's trade deadline candidate. He's going to go somewhere. He's going to fetch something for the Sabres that will actually be beneficial in the future.
It depends what you clarify as beneficial. I mean, there's a few guys I think that you can get, I don't know, maybe with fourth rounders and beyond. One guy is Nathan Beaulieu. I mean, he's requested the trade. He's playing more. But I still think he's ultimately, at the end of the day, is probably going to be gone and traded. They have to do something to open up that blue line. They have 17 defensemen, so they got to get one of them out of here eventually. So I think that happens. Jason Pominville is interesting. I don't know if they're going to move him, but it's certainly an interesting conversation to have. I think that more relies on what Pominville wants to do. If he wants to go chase a cup, I think they'll move him. If he doesn't, I don't think they will. So that's worth keeping an eye on. And then beyond that, I don't know, do they try to get something for Larson or Girgensons? Maybe. Scandella's hurt, so I can't really see that type of thing happening. So I don't know. Like you said, there's really not a lot there. And then in terms of them going to grab anybody, I don't know much I think that'll happen either. But really, there's only 2 or 3 guys that realistically could be moved. And besides Beaulieu, who I'm pretty confident will be, I'm not sure there'll be much beyond that.
I mean, you look at the one thing I did was I was chatting with Brayton recently, just regarding kind of the makeup of the roster. And if you go to cap friendly, it's tough because I mean, it's nice to not see, aside from Jack Eichel, really any long-term contracts. But then again, with that being said, the guys that are available, I mean, you've got, you just look down the roster. You've got Skinner not going anywhere. Pominville, maybe. Reinhart not going anywhere. Sobotka, you can't trade him because he's got, I mean, thankfully he only has one season at $3.5 million left, but with obviously how he's played, I don't think that's going to happen unless you eat almost the entire contract, which at that point, it's more beneficial for, I hate to say it, but at that point, it's more beneficial to have a guy on the roster like that than to pay him to play somewhere else. Like Sherry, Girgensons, Larson, Wilson, Thompson, Middlestat. You start to go on the list and you just say to yourself, there's no way, there's just no way they'll trade these guys. I mean, maybe they throw a surprise curveball, but to me, honestly, it does seem like it sucks because I remember when I was first getting into hockey and the trade deadline was the time. Like they would say, oh yeah, things can be done in the off season or on July 1st, but the trade deadline is the time. And as time has gone on, it's really transitioned to being the draft and July 1st being the time where you can kind of tinker a little at the deadline. The good teams can make the big trades, but aside from that, you can't make these big deals anymore at the deadline. So, it's kind of a bummer because I really do think that this version of the Sabres is the version we're going to get. I mean, like you mentioned, I'm a big fan of the idea of shipping Pominville out just because it's the sentimental thing. Like when they traded Mike Weber, I know everyone still gets a kick out of that trade. I mean, that's the one thing I was telling people too is, they said, well, you can't trade Pominville. And I'm like, what would you get for him? I'm like, well, they traded Mike Weber. They can anybody can be traded. You look at both ends of the spectrum. I think to myself, Wayne Gretzky was once traded. First off, and then on the bottom end of the spectrum, I think to myself, Mike Weber was traded for a relatively valuable draft pick. So
3rd round pick.
Anything can happen. Anything is possible. Like Kevin Garnett once said, anything is possible. Anything can happen. crazier things have happened, but anything can happen. Just looking at it, I'm cool with the idea of even if you just ship Pominville out to open up a spot to bring up Victor Olofsson to give him a shot. Because look, at this point, is Olofsson ready for the NHL? I mean, some people say yes, some people say no. He's got some stuff to work on, but here's my thought. I'm a very big fan of if he looks ready, bring him up, give him that time. So that way, it's like with Lawrence Pilot. I think Lawrence Pilot should be in the lineup. Don't, absolutely 110%. We've seen the fancy stats from you, Chad, that tell us Pilot should be in the lineup. But then again, you know what? If you're gonna keep a guy in the AHL, at least bring him up for a little while. Let him see what he needs to improve. Let him get the sense of the game. Send him back and say, okay, you've been here. You've got your taste. Now do me a favor. Get better. Improve. Show me you can be better. And then we'll bring you back. So if you can get a guy like Olofsson and get him a cup of coffee, but you have to trade a guy like Pominville or move someone off this roster because there is quite a logjam, both offensively and defensively. I mean, offensively, the players aren't very good that are in the logjam. But, something's got to give at some point in time. And that's kind of been the downfall of the Sabres is once they got back to being mediocre, nothing happened. Everyone was just kind of bad.
Yeah, and, I think the thing, in regard to trades, too, we say there's not really, there's probably not going to be anything, at least in terms of adding a player. I think I do want to say I think there was opportunity there. I just don't think it was taken advantage of. I mean, we've seen Charlie Coyle traded. We've seen Nino Niederreiter traded. There's been guys who have term that could help you this season and beyond. But just for whatever reason, whether he didn't like the player or the deal wasn't right or whatever it is, Botterill chose not to at least go after those few players. But I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if there's other players, that have term that could be moved tomorrow. Chris Kreider's one guy. I could see somebody in Anaheim, maybe Montour, or one of those guys being moved too. So, I mean, there's possibilities there. It's just if the general manager wants to get involved in them, and I'm not quite sure. Honestly, it's hard to figure out what his plan is. Maybe he just likes to make his deals in the off season, and that's just what he does. I don't necessarily agree with it 100%, but it is what it is. And maybe we'll get an addition for Rochester, like you said, but I think Rochester just got its 2 deadline additions, getting CJ Smith and Lawrence Pilot back. I'm not sure what else you can do beyond that to help them, because those were 2 pretty big additions to give them. So I don't know. I'm hoping something happens here over the next 24 hours, but it's not looking like it, and I guess that's kind of disappointing because we'll just sit here through the rest of today. Because usually how it goes the day before the deadline is kind of exciting, and then when everybody kind of takes off of work to hang out on Monday, nothing happens until like 2:50. So we'll probably see some trades today, and then a few more tomorrow, and we'll watch the rest of the league have some fun because there are still some big players. Mark Stone, Kevin Hayes, like I said, Chris Kreider, another big one that goes. So there are some free agents and rentals that are still out there on the market, some big names. So at least,
I was going to say,
league standpoint,
I've taken the deadline off for probably the last, I want to say almost 10 years, maybe. Mm-hmm. I know this year is the first year that I won't be able to for in a long time, at least that I can remember. But I remember the days back when I would go to the arena. You'd hang out in the player cafeteria. You'd hang out or the media cafeteria, and you'd wait 6, 7, 8, 9 hours, and nothing would happen. You'd get like, oh, the Sabres acquired a backup goaltender who will play 3 times between now and the end of the season. Congratulations. I'm so glad I took the day off today. Yeah. And I know last year it was kind of the same way where I was just sitting around in my office and I'm like, I was having that's the one thing I'm bummed about this year, breaking down the third wall real quick. Cause I loved last year running the live trade deadline page where you're just pulling stuff from Twitter and you're like, ooh, something's happening. Ooh, there's a rumor, and you just throw it up and then you can kind of see
right.
Everyone freak out about it. That's always for me. That was always fun. But speaking about Jason Botterill, the one thing I did kind of want to ask you about is, in a roundabout way, is we saw Tim Murray was afraid to make a deal. He was afraid to part with his assets. That ended up being his downfall. Is that he was like, I have the ammo to make the trades, but never actually pulled the trigger. Where with Jason Botterill, it seems like he's willing to make the deal, but it's almost, to me at least, it seems like that GM that sits back and says, look we have X, Y, Z, but I don't want to bet on this team right now. And to me, that's what it seems like, where, they say Pierre LeBrun said that the Sabres were in on Carl Hagelin before he went to Washington. Washington ended up paying the price that they paid because of where they are, because of their status of who they are as a franchise defending Stanley Cup champions, looking like they're going to go back to the playoffs, need some more reinforcements. Where if the Sabres go out and pay what some people on Twitter were saying, maybe you trade a guy like Rasmus Asplund and some high picks. Do you really want to do that for Carl Hagelin to help you now maybe make the playoffs? It's one of those things where you think to yourself, like, on the surface, yes, we want trades. We want something or someone to break the stagnation of the Sabres roster that's kind of just stuck around since after that 10-game win streak. And then again, if you look at it and you think to yourself, yes, it would be nice to make a trade, but it's also nice to not overreact. And it seems like right now, at least right now, giving Jason Botterill the benefit of the doubt, it seems like he's not overreacting. Maybe he's letting things naturally develop and say, in the offseason, I'll revisit whatever it may be, or I'll be more willing to deal these pieces once things kind of shake out and we know where we stand. But I definitely, I'm glad, for me at least, I'm glad it's not an overreaction right now. It's more of a level-headed, we know what this guy's worth to us. We're not going to overpay. We're not going to go crazy. And for me, I think that's good. I'm still, again, a little uneasy because the more we've seen the story so many times with when Darcy was running out of time, where he's like, we'll go out and we'll go Cody Hodgson. Oh, great. Look what we did. We made a big move. Didn't turn out to be a big move, whatever. Or with Tim Murray, like you said, where he's like, the only trade deadline acquisition is a AHL defenseman. And you're like, oh, cool, great, awesome. Good job fixing the big club. Wonderful. So, I mean, for you, do you think there will be pitchforks and flames and people running around yelling about Botterill if a big trade or even if a trade isn't made? Or do you think people may sit back and say, we see what's going on around the league and we're glad you didn't do this or that to completely blow up what you have working?
No, I think the only way that you see, if he doesn't do anything, there's obviously going to be people who are mad, but I don't think it gets really bad unless, like I said, one of those guys that I mentioned, Kreider, Montour, and anybody really out of the Anaheim core that has some term left. If some of those players go and you look at it and go, well, I could have made that trade, then maybe you start to see some flames raining down upon him. But, for me, it's in terms of what you were saying, not overreacting. You're right. I mean, it's hard, and he deserves some credit for that. But on the flip side, I think they thought going into the season this is going to be a development season, and I think they should have changed their minds in November when that 10-game winning streak happened, because you can still develop and win hockey games too. You're allowed to do that. Last time I checked, there wasn't a rule against that. You can do that. So the fact that he sat there, and I don't know, maybe he did try to make trades, but the way it looks from the outside is he sat there and just watched this team go down like the Titanic and didn't really do anything about it. Winning 11 of 30 something games, something like that. Crazy. I mean, it's just the second worst record in the league since the streak ended. And I think it's disappointing that way. It's not recognizing that you can develop and then you can also make a push for the playoffs and use the playoffs. Even if you get swept in the first round by Tampa Bay, whatever, fine. But you get that playoff experience for an 18-year-old Dahlin, for Eichel, for Reinhart, for whoever else, Casey Middlestat, whoever's going to be part of your core going forward. I think that playoff experience is important. And I don't even care if you go up in the first round. It's the experience itself. It's a process, the process of building a winning team, and that's part of it. Now what's going to happen is you have to, instead of expediting your process and maybe moving that up a year, you're going to put that, again, push it back a year. Now next year has to be a playoff year. You're burning another year of Darling's entry-level contract, which the Sabres burn entry-level contracts like it's nobody's business and just waste them. You're going to burn off another year of Sam Reinhart's contract, which looks like he's going to be due a pretty sizable raise after next season. So it's all these things that kind of come into it. And you don't know what's going to happen next season. I mean, what if, knock on wood, one of your key players gets injured and that pretty much knocks the whole season off the rails, where this season you could have maybe went for something. I understand part of it is, you want to build for next season, and next year is going to be really our year. It's going to be really, but it's in a vacuum. You really, it's. I guess it's unfortunate that you kind of let an opportunity pass you by, and now we'll have to listen for at least the next month and a half here while other teams are playing important games, and we'll be talking about development, and we should get some AHL guys up here. And I don't know, let's see how Victor Olofsson does in his 5-game cup of tea here in the end of April, or the beginning of April. So we've seen this season so many times, Ryan. That's the unfortunate part. Where early in the season looked like it'd be a different show, but here we are 2 months later, and unfortunately, it's not.
Yeah, it's hard, especially this season, because Jack Eichel's been so good. Jeff Skinner with his rubber ankle, so good.
Yeah.
Sam Reinhart, been incredible. Rasmus Dahlin has been even, to me, I may speak for some other people here, but for me, at least, it's been a revelation. I know he was going to be good, but he's been incredible to watch. Early in the season, the play of Carter Hutton, of Linus Ullmark, even continuing on throughout, I know that things have been good, things have been bad, but for the most part, been impressed. To see Casey Middlestat step in and be relatively good at such a young age, stuff like that, you're going to look back and say, wow, they really squandered a decent opportunity to at least make the playoffs. Like you said, there's nothing wrong with making the playoffs and getting beat up in the first round and losing, because again, you build from that. It doesn't happen very often, if ever, where a team goes from being out of the playoffs and bad to winning the Stanley Cup the next season. It takes time. It takes building. You got to get players the experience. So when it comes down to it, they know exactly what to do, how to react, because we all see it every year. The regular season is fun, but the Stanley Cup playoffs are next level. And most of the guys in this roster have no idea what that means. So a lot of fun. Hopefully the next few months, the Sabres can kick it into some sort of gear and maybe make this fun. They're far enough out now where it's hard to see unless they go on another big streak, or they may be able to sniff the playoffs. I know that they're technically still in the hunt, but with how the other teams are playing and how the other teams are loading up, it doesn't look too good for Buffalo, but crazier things have happened. And I guess, hey, just looking forward to the rest of the season, because if nothing else, I love to hate watch the Buffalo Sabres as the weather gets nicer.
I think everybody enjoys that. So that's one thing to look forward to.
It's a national pastime at this point. That's why when the Sabres were good, I didn't know what to do with myself. I'm like, I'm supposed to hate this team. And they're good, so I have to like them. And then when they started doing bad again, I'm like, oh yeah, that's the team I know and love.
Right. It's more fun after games when they play bad games. And you're like, oh, look at all this bad stuff. For a game like yesterday, they played good. You're like, yeah, I don't know, they played good. I guess see you on Monday. Like that.
Look, it's you've seen it. People tell us that we're too negative, but we just write what we see.
Exactly.
It's a lot easier to just tell you how it is than to be like, oh yeah, they lost 7-2, but those 2 goals were really good. It's like, no, don't do that. Just don't do that. But
just be happy you're not the Ristolainen guy on Twitter who gets, every time Ristolainen makes a hit, gets tweeted at. Oh, you want to trade him now? Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Brayton has told me that that some of those people have gotten on him as well. That I'm thankfully, knock on wood, those people that tweet at me, I've learned to just ignore. There are some people out there who you see the tweets and you're like, I just can't right now. Like sometimes you love to poke the bear. It's a lot of fun. Yeah. Other times you're just like, look it, I got things I got to do today. I can't.
Exactly.
But with that being said, Chad, I appreciate you joining me today. I want to tell everybody before, because I didn't when we started the podcast here. You can follow Chad on Twitter at CM, and I'll spell it out for you. DeDominicis. You can also check out his podcast at BTB Hockey Beyond the Blade. You can also check out, obviously, diebytheblade.com. As I mentioned, I didn't mention before because I was apparently still half asleep when we started the podcast. You can hear this podcast on Google Play, Spotify, iTunes, Spreaker, iHeartRadio. Wherever you hear podcasts, you can hear this podcast. If not, tell me. I'll make John fix it, because we got to make John do something. But, Chad, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate you being the first guest ever in the history, the short history of the Sabrecast. Hopefully we can do this again sometime soon with a bit happier times. And we can talk better things.
Right. Yeah, no, not a problem. Anytime. I'm honored to be number one. I appreciate it. So you keep doing you, and I'm sure this podcast will be awesome.
I appreciate you, man. Hey, and also, real quick before we go, thank the good Lord heavens, whatever, Buffalo hockey gods that whatever the hell happened to Jeff Skinner's ankle and knee yesterday, he's fine.
I don't even. That guy is an animal. I don't know how he came back. I have no idea. I have no idea.
Real quick, I went from let's ride out the string to the season was over in 15 seconds.
Yep.
When he came back, I said, okay, the season can be back on. I'm sorry for canceling. Apologize.
Yeah. But he went down. I'm like, oh, well, if they weren't done now, they are finished now. So that'll do it. That's the fat lady singing right there. But hey, he's okay. Thank the good Lord. And the Sabres hockey's back on. Trade deadline tomorrow on the 25th at 3 p.m. We will be back here very soon. Chad, thanks again for joining us, and everyone else, appreciate you tuning in. We will catch you sometime very soon.
The preceding presentation has been brought to you by the Gear Network.